part of the Press Play Podcast Network.
Hello, 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 hello.
What's up?
This is the Ball Card Show, the sports podcast.
For the Sports Collector.
I'm Jason Otero.
I'm Gary LeMaster.
And as always, we are brought to you by the Press Play Podcast Network. And we've got some scandals to talk about today.
You make it sound real salacious.
Never had a deep voice, so I can't really do that.
Real salacious.
Don't ever do that again. And the eye contact is especially not necessary.
You didn't like that?
No, ladies and gentlemen listening at home, he just tried to seduce me with his eyes.
You like that little bass rumble?
No, I didn't like any of it.
I can take it from here.
I felt
all
uncomfortable.
The way
He's going to keep going. Let's change the subject. Did you feel good getting all that prospecting in, man? You've had like 6 straight weeks of prospecting themed episodes.
It's pretty great.
Well, by 6 straight weeks, I mean like 2 months, but 6 weeks.
Spread out.
Well, like
bit.
3 months, 6 weeks of content. But yeah, had some good feedback on that.
We did. Last week's episode
takes.
was a lot of fun. And just so we can keep track of rights and wrongs, Junior Caminero is absolutely lighting it up. Davison De Los Santos also absolutely lighting it up. Matt Mervis has been called up.
Sure can't get in those breaks. Those are filling real quick.
Yeah, and Matt Mervis getting called up was a real kick in the nuts because we had tickets to the Clippers game against the Iowa Cubs that night.
Oh, did you?
And I was going to see him, and I was going to see Christopher Morel, and they called him up that morning, and I only got to see Christopher Morel, who since has also been called up.
Yeah. So basically, we're psychic, guys. Listen. We know.
We know. By we know, you mean I find guys, you watch videos of their swing, and then we figure out what we're doing.
Yeah, and by you find guys, you mean you look through the Bowman checklist.
That's part of my research.
Yeah, okay.
That's not all my research.
Yeah, Albert Einstein over here. All right, so you want to jump into just some heated issue?
Listen, today's episode is brought to you by the mind of Jason Otero. I am in full-on response mode. He broke this episode down. This is what we're doing. I said, cool, I've been prospecting for 3 months. This is your show.
Let's get into some juicy scandal. Don't say... He leaned into the mic, looked me in the eyes already, and I had to stop it. I do not consent to that visual abuse. It's already abusive enough looking at you. Don't look me in the eyes. Look away!
What do we got?
Okay. So I want to jump into this card trimming scandal discussion. If you're listening to any sports card related podcast content, you've definitely heard about this. But just in case you have not, Evan Mathis, former NFL player, you said with the Eagles, right?
Correct.
Pro bowler.
I think he played for the Titans maybe too at one point. He was around the league for a while.
He had a video where he basically confessed to trimming cards.
Showed people how.
And not just, confess, he showed people how to trim cards, which is quite the confession. What's interesting is when I say confession, I am assuming some level of guilt. He doesn't seem to feel any at all.
No.
And so you and I were talking about this, and we're even a little split on parts of this conversation. Not everything, but I want to kind of dive into how card trimming affects the hobby. But do you mind doing kind of here's the thing.
Now who's making eye contact aggressively?
I'm aggressively making it because here's what I want to do. I'm going to, because you're so articulate within this, I would like for you to explain what card trimming is.
Okay.
Why it happens. I do not want you to do your typical tilt the field, set the stage, just a 101.
Factual 101.
What is it?
Got it.
Why is it something? Now, let's just leave it there. What is card trimming? How long has it been around?
Okay. Card trimming has been around since people started collecting cards. So I'd say the early 1900s. Card trimming is the process by which you take a card, you remove part of the card, usually a full edge, to get rid of defects in the card, either worn edge or whitened corners or rounded corners. And you do that to increase the eye appeal And in increasing the eye appeal, you oftentimes increase the value.
Okay. Hey, thank you for
welcome.
an unbiased approach.
Yeah,
to that.
I just gave you the facts of what card trimming is.
So let's go a step deeper. You're going to begin to hear some opinions here. But one thing that Evan said in the interview that we listened to, I listened to one. I saw the video originally. I watched or listened to the interview with Sports Cards Nonsense. I thought it was a pretty good discussion. But he made the statement, you've all handled trimmed cards. If you've been in this hobby for a while, you have seen, you have handled, you've likely purchased trim cards, whether you know it or not. I could say 100% I have either purchased or seen them. But the ones that I've seen and purchased, typically it was pretty obvious. If I'm buying a card that looks like it was trimmed, it probably doesn't have much value because my expectation is that it would be a depreciated value. That's not everyone's, but I wouldn't buy anything high end that I thought was trimmed. Now, most of what we've seen that is trimmed is just horribly trimmed to where the card is smaller and it's super noticeable. Even in a top loader, somebody thought it would be okay to break out the craft scissors and just cut this up, right? That's probably not what he was talking about when he says you've purchased and handled. There's so many trim cards out there. Can you walk through so we're talking about really precise work. We're talking about a very thorough process for these ones. And a lot of these, a big part of the scandal is there's a lot of trimmed cards out there with PSA slabs on them.
Yeah.
And so can you kind of walk through what someone more specifically has to do and maybe a couple examples of common cards where that happens?
Yeah. So in the modern and ultra modern world, it's really difficult, especially because the highest value cards tend to be cards that are chrome. And the process by which the factory cuts a chrome card results in a very specific edge profile. It's almost impossible, to replicate that edge profile with the type of tools that you and I would have available to us.
Right.
There are tools out there that you can get that will allow you to create that, but it's a lot like this is, you listeners may not get this. You'll get what I'm saying, so I won't get deep into this, but it's a lot like Surewinder versus winding bars.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is not a good example to use.
No, it's not. But that's my point.
Yeah.
You can go buy tools to be able to do this, but the investment in those tools is usually really, really high. And you'd have to have the right cards to do it. So modern stuff, it doesn't happen too much. And ultra modern, it doesn't happen too much. And what Evan Mathis was saying, and I think got lost in that interview, and that he did not articulate very well, is the vast majority of cards that he's talking about are what we would all consider vintage cards, pre-junk wax era, right? When the cards coming from the factory, if you go buy a pack of 1985 Topps baseball right now, or 1982 Topps baseball right now, you would be able to go through the pack and just hold the cards together in one brick, and you'd be able to see that 2 or 3 or 4 of those cards are a little narrower or a little wider than the rest of the cards. They were cut from the factory slightly too large. So what the big time card trimmers in the past and the guys who still do it now, and there are guys who still do it now, they look for example, say a Ricky Henderson rookie. It's a very hard card to get a gem on. They would look for Ricky Henderson rookies that were maybe a 32nd of an inch wider from the factory than they should have been. Well, now they can remove a 32nd of an inch from one edge of that card and probably vastly improve the eye appeal of the card, and it still be within factory specs. And now it's very easy to grade.
Yeah, so it enables it to be graded.
Correct.
Which enables it to be far more valuable.
Correct.
For some, maybe they just want that Ricky Henderson, just for themselves, and they'll never sell it. However, I seem to believe the large majority of those, that's
profit.
happening to profit.
Absolutely. 100%, no question about that. I think where it gets blurry from an ethical standpoint.
It's not that blurry to me, but go ahead.
Okay. For me, where I think it gets blurry from an ethical standpoint is, are we taking a card and making it no longer to the factory specs? If I have a card that's 2.5 inches by 3.5 inches, that's the factory specs. And I get it from the factory and it's 2.6 inches by 3.5 inches. And it's slightly OC by just that much. Mm-hmm. Well, if I take it to the factory specs, have I altered the card? I guess technically, but have I just brought it back to factory specs? That's the question. Now, am I saying that that's okay still? I'm not saying for me that I think it is. I'm saying that I can understand the ethical blurriness of that argument. It's the same thing with, say I stumble across a sheet of, which would be insane. I would never cut this down because it would be worth way more as a sheet. But just for example, say I stumble into a sheet of 1952 Topps. That sheet has Mickey Mantle. That sheet run would also have, because of the numbering sequence, it would have Mantle. It would have Hank Aaron. If I simply cut that sheet down into the individual cards using the same methods and same sizing that the factory would have used in 1952, is that trimming?
So, can I jump in now?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So here's where I'll jump in. Anytime, just hear me out.
I'm listening.
You have a sheet of cardboard. Okay. And then you grab some freaking scissors. Hold on. Or an X-Acto knife or whatever the new tool is, right? And you hear me out. Listen real close.
I'm just playing with Delilah
so,
right now.
Delilah is my cat. For those of you listening, this is why there should be video. Good Lord. All right. Back to this argument. The sheet, the cardboard, a cutting utensil. Yeah, that's trimming, bud.
Okay.
Those are all the ingredients you need for trimming cards. By definition.
So the factory also trims cards.
I could break down. Hold on. No, you've talked for 5 minutes. Give me 2. You can, by definition, call that trimming, because what did you do? You cut that out of the factory sheet. Now, I agree with what you're saying in regards to the fact that these factories do have standards. These are the sizes the cards are supposed to be, and they don't always come out the way they should, especially with the vintage stuff, right? I could feel it in my hand when you would open a pack and you would feel one card sticking out, touching your thumb and finger. So, man, what a bummer, right? Sometimes. Usually I would be lucky enough to the card I was chasing that was there. The player I liked, right? You are not the factory. I am not the factory. But let's take a little bit of a deeper dive into like collecting in general, okay? A high value for most collectors in any hobby where it's like a tangible good is the condition of the product.
Correct.
Some people want it to be, with antiques, they want it to have all the crap that it's accrued over the years. That's not the same as how it came out of the factory. I hear where you're going with that. You didn't even go there. You didn't even raise your voice. However, the condition's important. The analogy I gave you was like if you had fine china or a set of silverware and you decided to polish all of those rather than leaving the patina on them, that's less desirable to the collector because the collector is looking for something. If I discovered for me that there's a card that was trimmed because, the factory didn't quite do it right, I don't want to do business with that person. They've altered the condition of the card. So hear me out. The reason that I have a problem with this is, let's say we live in a world where the factory gets it right every time.
Okay.
And centering is, from now on, centering is 50-50.
Okay.
There's not going to be a variance with cards. And in my opinion, the card value itself would lower across the board because it is the variance within the quality that changes the value of a card, especially in vintage. The value in a leap of a vintage Hank Aaron doesn't even have to be a rookie card, right? From a graded 2 to a graded 3 is a significant amount of money, right?
Yeah.
The condition, even whether from factory or from care along the way, right, which is an interesting word to use, will determine the value of that card. So anytime somebody is doing something and in their opinion, it's like they didn't quite get it right. I got this. It reminds me of someone who buys their wife a new car and then just like under the hood starts pulling stuff out like, I know better here.
I think that while I understand what you're saying, the one thing where I think that you're maybe misconstruing what's happening in trimming, I can understand what you're saying if you're applying it to modern cards. The vast majority of trimming that occurs on vintage cards, to my knowledge, isn't as much to do with centering as it is to get rid of bad corners and bad edges. The centering on true vintage stuff was so horrible most of the time that if you trimmed enough to get the card centered, you're taking an eighth of an inch off of the card. Like it's too much. Most of the trimming that occurs is infinitesimal in the amount that's taken off of a card. It's literally just enough to get rid of a frayed edge. It's just enough to get rid of a slightly whitened corner or a rounded corner. And one of the things that Evan said in that interview is that trimmers look for cards that were too big so they could cut them down to the actual size because then they would grade. And yes, they're doing that for profit. There's no question about that. And I think that it should be disclosed, but I also think that it points to another problem in the hobby, and you can look at it as a problem. I know some people do. If a grading company that everybody has put their trust in doesn't have the ability to detect whether this has happened to a card, I mean,
okay, so
what are we supposed to do?
I think you're making some good arguments. I think.
I mean, is grading the scam then? I mean, is that really the scam?
We spent a lot of time on that.
Yeah, I mean, is that really the scam?
Could be. What about touching up an auto?
Explain what you mean by touching up.
So let's say there's a high value. Okay. You're sending off a card for an auto grade and a card grade, which I would never recommend.
No,
however,
just get it authenticated.
In this case, that's what you want to do, right? The player definitely signed this card.
Yep.
100%. But it seems like some of the edges ran off or it's missing a gap, and that's not going to tint, but that's an autograph. It's a real autograph.
Yeah.
How is it different? Or maybe you're okay with this. If I would just touch up that auto with the exact same color ink, I'm just off the factory. Those autos were supposed to be better than that.
So, but here's the difference in what you're saying. There's literally zero way that you can do that and it not be immediately visible to whoever's grading.
I hear you, but that would be like, so a lot of people would say that about cut cards.
But the thing is, you can trim a card so that if you trimmed a card that was bigger than it should have been down to the factory size, it will get through 100 out of 100
If someone
times.
was able to do it, would you have a problem with it?
Was able to do what with
touch
an
up an auto?
No, I don't think I would.
Okay.
But they can't. But I don't think I would have a problem with that.
That is wild to me.
Well, if you think about it this way.
Would you disclose? So let's say you could do it. Would you disclose it?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
We both agree on that.
Absolutely. If you're doing something like that, you should disclose it. I think that at the end of the day, though, the issue becomes more that we have really strange lines that we tend to draw in the sand very just randomly. So in the art world, it is not only common, but oftentimes encouraged to restore paintings.
This is a good argument.
It's not only common, but encouraged to restore a painting. Some of the most famous paintings by the most famous artists of all time have been restored so that they maintain their vibrance and their beauty, right? In the art world, that's not something that makes people lose their mind. It's disclosed. We were talking about this a little bit before the podcast. If I had a card, say I was in a position where I could buy a Jackie Robinson rookie, right? If I'm buying a Jackie Robinson rookie, here's what I want to know about it. I want to know, one, that it's real. And 2, I just want it to look good because that'd be something I'd be buying to display.
Yeah, sure.
Right? If I bought a card that met those 2 criteria and it was the correct size that it should have been from the factory, and I find out later that it was trimmed down to that size, I would not care at all.
I would feel so deflated.
Yeah, I wouldn't care at all.
So this is a difference between some collectors. We both agree on this idea of if you like it, get it, keep it, hold it. We both agree that standards off the factory, which, a really old rookie card, it's going to be hard to do that. But with what we have available now, cards should be coming off the line a lot more within spec than they do.
They should, but they don't.
They don't quite do that. But yeah, I can see what the art collector piece of that. If it's a restoration, now that would be public knowledge. It'd be really clear.
Yeah.
The guys that are out trimming cards, by and large, are not talking about it.
But I would also say that 98% of cards that are in holders have been improved in some way.
I think that's wildly overestimating it.
You do?
Yeah.
Open up a pack of cards and tell me how many of them have a fingerprint.
You said cards in holders, right?
Yes. Let me finish. Open up a pack of cards and tell me how many of them either have a fingerprint or a smudge or a small line that will wipe off with a microfiber cloth.
So that is altering the card.
That's improving the card from the condition it was in when it came out of the pack, isn't it? If I wipe a fingerprint off and it came out of the pack with a fingerprint.
How do you know if it was what about your fingerprint? Did you make the card worse?
It's possible, but I can also tell you that when I open up a pack of cards, I never touch the face of a card.
Yeah, I do think that there's a parallel there between guys that are like enraged by the cutting, but also are sending everything off to get quote unquote cleaned up,
and prepped before it goes to grading.
Soft corners, it would be a similar thing. I think
you can fix soft corners.
I'm agreeing with you. Let me do it.
Okay.
You don't have to argue when somebody's agreeing with you. And on this point, we're on the same page. So you're interrupting me to repeat what's coming out of my mouth or what's about to.
Okay.
So you're not going to get to enjoy the satisfaction of me being on your side.
Oh, I still will.
I don't think you are.
Okay.
But here's where we differ. And I think this analogy you gave about the Tom Brady contenders, I think that is a great way for people to look at a couple different camps here. So break down.
We actually haven't talked about that here yet. We just talked about it before.
I know.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay.
What are you doing?
I thought you were thinking that I had already said it.
Hey, guys, if you have a different opinion from Gary, I just want you to understand. He goes upstairs and grabs a button down and nerd glasses with tape because he's like, it's debate team time. And there are points awarded. All right.
Goodness gracious. Okay.
So break down that card.
Yeah.
With common issues with it. And then I think there's a couple different ways people really do view collecting a card like that.
Yeah. So the probably the most desirable Tom Brady rookie card is the Panini Contenders rookie auto, the rookie ticket auto. The second would be the Bowman Chrome, but the Contenders rookie auto is the big deal. Mm-hmm. That card is rejected from PSA in a phenomenal clip, like an 80% clip.
And by rejected, what do you mean? Because I don't think everybody realizes.
They min size it. Yeah. They say it doesn't meet the factory sizing.
So that's different from min grade. It's
correct.
Not the same thing. That's really important to understand.
Min grade means, say I send something to PSA and I tell them I only want it slabbed if it's a 9 or better. If it doesn't meet that, they'll send it back with a flip, not in a holder, just a flip in a soft sleeve that says min grade. It didn't meet the grade I wanted. But min size means that they measured the card and it does not meet the factory specs. Mm-hmm. That particular card does not meet the factory specs at a phenomenal clip. A lot of times because it's too big, not too small. If I pulled that card out of a pack,
oh my God,
and sent it in and that comes back, it's also one of the most faked cards of all time. What am I supposed to do with that card? Everybody's going to assume that it's fake because it's not in a holder. If it was real, it'd be in a holder, except PSA won't even slab it as authentic if it doesn't meet min size. You could send it to SGC and get it slabbed as authentic. Mm-hmm. But that's one of those cards that falls into that category, and it's one of the most desirable cards of all time.
You pull that card, you're comfortable. Let's say you had all the tools, you knew what you were doing, you weren't going to screw the card up, like as far as like you're not going to destroy it.
Right.
You're okay with trimming that card.
I couldn't care less if it went to factory standards.
Are you okay with trimming that card?
Yeah. As long as it's disclosed. Yeah.
So in my perspective,
The key is disclosed.
no, we both agree on that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. If you're doing this selling, you're not telling people, "Hey, I touched this up."
You're a
or I
dirt
cut it.
bag.
Yeah,
You're a
that's
dirt
mess.
bag. Yeah.
I think what makes a card super rare, valuable, collectible, desirable isn't only who it is, the print run, but even in some scenarios, like if you got one of those that's authenticated, man, that's a real diamond in the rough. It's really hard to do that with that card.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good thing for the hobby. Now, where I'm even arguing with myself in my own head is I also am very frustrated with the poor quality control that we have in the card industry.
Yeah.
In other hobbies I've been a part of with collecting, whether it was, vinyl records is one that, I have a pretty sizable collection of. Condition, errors, print runs, what press plate it was. There are a lot of factors that can take a vinyl record that's typically worth $5 or $10 and make it a $50 record real quick. And it can be much more than that. But in most cases, it is the rarity or the goofy thing or the misprint or the miscut or the label that's crooked or upside down that can be the thing that makes it more desirable. This is not the case for everyone in every hobby. And I understand if people just want to, if you want to cut your cards so that they look good for you and hang on to them forever, I think that's great. But I have a real concern with the dismissive nature of the conversation for a lot of people. Cut them. It's fine. Factory should have done better. You're making it better. You're improving it.
Yeah. But again, that to me, that's where it becomes such a weird ethical line.
How much is too much?
Yeah. Like, what's the line on improvement?
So you're good with touching up autos. You're good with cutting.
You can't touch up an auto, but I guess in a pretend world where you could, to me, it's no different than
fixing
restoring
soft
a piece
corners, cutting
Yeah.
the burrs off the edge of a card.
Well, yeah, but that's if you're using a cutting tool, you're trimming.
If you're cleaning the surface with something that would maybe there was like like early 90s NBA stuff, late 80s, there's a lot of discoloration, right? And I've seen people try to quote unquote restore that. All of those things fall within the parameter of what you're comfortable with. For some reason, for me, half of those make me really uncomfortable.
Yeah. and I think that it all boils down to, like you said, how you view things. And again, as somebody that has been in this hobby for a very long time, when we turn over the keys of the gatekeeping of the hobby to the grading companies, we've also created a world where we've incentivized behavior that may be behavior we don't like, but we incentivize the hell out of it.
Yeah.
And then we get mad about it, but the grading company looks at it and goes, yeah, we'll put a number on this and put it in a slab. So again, who should we be upset at? Should we be upset at the people that are altering cards? I guess to an extent if they're not disclosing things, although I don't think I need to disclose that I wiped a fingerprint off of something. That's asinine to me.
Well, you just said
It is altering a card. That's my point, though. This is a very nuanced conversation. It's not as black and white as people like to make it. That's why the episode of Sports Card Nonsense, when they interviewed this guy, was so annoying to me, because you got Mike just basically calling this guy every name in the book and not recognizing or even trying to have a conversation that this is not as black and white as we would like it to be. Like, it's a nuanced thing. We can all point a finger and go, I would never in a million years do that. But if I got a 52 mantle that's perfect on three sides and it's a 32nd of an inch too wide from the factory and it can easily be trimmed down and now it's worth life-changing money, you tell me 99
No, finish it. What are you going to do?
Tell me 99 out of 100 people aren't going to go, yeah, I'll take that 10
You would
mil.
risk that?
I didn't say I would risk that. I'm saying that.
So you're the 1 out of 100.
I'm not saying I wouldn't risk it either.
There it is.
I've never been in that situation.
Right.
But again, let's not pretend.
There's an additional risk, though, that it looks a little too good.
Well,
And then now you've gone from the value you had to, hey, stay away from this card.
is it though? Because
Yes.
if I send a card like that to PSA, which is what maximizes my value, right? And it's too big, it's not getting graded by PSA. I'm getting it back as a min size.
Because it is,
Too big.
which is qualification.
Doesn't meet factory standards,
Okay.
right? So if I send it to SGC and it gets an A, which is what it will get, it's worth X dollars, right? If I trim a 32nd of an inch off of it and it gets to factory standards and I send it to PSA and it gets an 8, it's now worth millions of dollars. But if they also then say min size and I send it to SGC, it's also still going to get an A. So I haven't lost anything,
But hear me out.
but I have a potential upside of millions of
But
dollars.
hear me out. This is the only issue I have. It is the wrong size off the line.
Correct.
That is the card you own.
Yes. I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying. What I'm saying is that when you're talking about something, and I think this is the bigger conversation around all of this. We can pretend as much as we want to that this is a hobby, quote unquote. Most hobbies don't have ecosystems with billions of dollars floating around in them. Most hobbies don't give you the potential to, in one fell swoop, make millions of dollars. This is not so much a hobby as it is a very strange hybrid between gambling and investing.
If that's your approach, you're going to be okay with card trimming. I agree with you.
And I think that while lots of people like to huff and puff and pretend that's not their approach, it's their approach. They just don't have the thing. They've never been faced with that scenario. They never were in a position like guys were in the late 70s and early 80s and mid 80s where you could go randomly find a stack of 25 or 30 Mantle rookies that you could buy for $5,000 and potentially turn it into millions of dollars. Those finds don't exist anymore because those guys already did it, right? But the point being that when we've got a hobby that's incentivized to the extent that this one is by money, you're going to have this type of activity occur. The one thing that
But you're almost saying like greed is going to make you do some crazy things.
It is.
But you're acknowledging fundamentally that it's not okay. That's the implication there.
I'm acknowledging fundamentally that if you are altering a card beyond factory specs, it should be disclosed.
Okay.
No question about that. What I'm saying is that...
And should PSA slab it?
Right.
No, I'm asking you.
Well, if PSA doesn't have the technology and the ability to...
But if you're disclosing it...
I'm talking about disclosing it to an end buyer. I'm not talking about disclosing it to PSA. That's their job. No, you don't want to get me started there. If you're gonna charge me, if I send PSA a 52 Mantle,
You're sounding so crooked in this
Do
episode,
you know-
bro.
No.
I know you don't. I don't believe Gary has ever trimmed a
I have
card.
never trimmed a card in my life.
He's way too lazy to put that kind of work in on cards.
But what I'm saying
you
is-
sound so sketchy right
Well,
now.
but listen, again, it goes back to this: what drives the ecosystem? If I send a 52 Mantle to PSA to have it graded, do you know what they're going to charge me to grade that thing?
A lot. It's going to be a lot of money.
Close to six figures.
Yeah.
Close to six figures. So it's
Pick
not
a different grading code.
It's not my job to tell them jack shit.
Yeah.
It's their job to tell me.
Yeah. I don't know how you sleep at night is my point.
Like a baby.
With my CPAP.
Yeah.
I go to bed just like everyone else. Take medicine, get real sleepy, hook up my CPAP, and then sleep like a babe.
Right?
All right. This dead horse has been beaten. But I do think it's a good conversation to have. I don't think that we're ever going to completely agree with each other, but we do agree. If you do anything to a card, disclose it.
Yes. And as a person who, if you're listening to this and you're in the hobby, just take some time to learn how to spot stuff.
Yeah.
Especially if you're buying vintage stuff. Learn what the size looks like. If it's in a holder and it looks like it's a little small for the holder, man, there's a real good chance it was trimmed.
Mm-hmm.
Like, just know what to look for. Yeah. Don't just look at the flip on the top and go, oh, it must be good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Nope,
So,
I agree with
anyhow.
you. Moving on to more positive news in the hobby. Whatnot.
What a shit show.
It's getting bad. Man, I got you cussing. This is a good episode. I'll be honest. There's not that many feeds on Whatnot lately.
What's really heartbreaking about Whatnot is when it first came out, it had so much potential.
Finally, the seller was going to be defended against scamming.
It looked like there was so much potential, and we did some stuff with Whatnot early, and then it just turned into this cesspool of hype beasts and just idiot
Still
kids.
waiting on my $2 Eddie Matthews card.
Yeah,
I'm going to look up the name of the seller real
idiot
quick.
kids acting like every $3 card they pull is a massive hit and ginning up overinflated sales prices for stuff. And then there've been rumblings on and off, like not Bleacher, but Backyard Breaks back in the day was doing a giveaway, and they gave away a box by the pack of Prism, and somebody hit a gold Trevor Lawrence Kaboom. Oh, it was Absolute, a gold Trevor Lawrence Kaboom. And they were like, oh, we can't give that away. There's been that type of stuff for a minute on Whatnot. And as it got uglier and uglier, we just stopped using the platform, both to sell and to buy.
Well, I will say that's true, but when Top Series 1 came out, I did get into some multi-case breaks with Filth Bomb.
Yeah. Okay.
However, I think, so the last time I heard back from this particular channel, which surprisingly has 20,000 followers, 7.6K reviews, and a 4.9 rating. Still waiting on that $2 Eddie Matthews Aqua Wave from the Topps Chrome 50th anniversary. It's not worth much, but on principle, if that's the only thing I hit and I basically got skunked and I didn't get it, and then July 6, 22, you say at 10:33, I'll look into this today. Just saying, it's been a couple days since July 6, 22. So Crave Collect, thank you for just highlighting something that we're trying to talk about here.
Yeah.
There's not much accountability on that. Who knows where that card is? It probably went in the wrong stack. It may not even be a $2 card. The principle is there's a platform.
I paid for something.
Yeah. And kind of the heart of this was, if you're a seller on eBay, you're getting screwed over. We understand that there should be a good balance here. There doesn't seem to be much support for the buyer if there's any issue at all. And so we have this huge scandal. I mean, multiple accusations.
So Bleacher Breaks, who's probably the second largest breaker on the platform behind Backyard Breaks. Recently, somebody finally had enough and posted that they had hit the Jalen Waddle 1 of 1 out of either Flawless or National Treasures. I think it was Flawless last year. And they never received the card. Mm-hmm. And then back and forth, they ended up getting a couple of boxes from the breaker. But they never got the card, and they never got what they thought was fair compensation. Lo and behold, 3.5 months later, the breaker on their Instagram shows their newest PSA return. And guess what card's in it? That Jalen Waddle 1 of 1.
It's a very specific card.
Yeah,
I mean,
and it's really interesting.
The cojones on these guys.
Yeah, and Then
it could be a coincidence,
Yeah, and then it ended up in their repack product.
Could be, but there's a lot of one-on-one patches
Then,
just like that.
Once that person stood up, about 20 more people showed up. We're talking about Trevor Lawrence gold autos to 10. We're talking about Tony Romo 1-of-1s out of Flawless like Flawless. We're talking about a bunch of high-end stuff that somehow never got to the customer who paid for the spot in the break, ended up getting subbed to PSA, and ended up back in this company's own repack product.
That's a lot of coincidences.
It's a whole lot of coincidences. So Bleacher was mum on it. Whatnot CEO came out with the most horrendous statement I've ever seen about 2 weeks ago on the situation, which was basically, these guys ship 1 million cards a month. It's going to happen sometimes. We're looking into it. What? Well, people started just blowing up there. This was one of the times where the hobby came together and said, we're not going to take this. They were running up team prices in these guys' breaks into the tens of thousands of dollars and then just not paying for them. To the point where Bleacher had to shut down all their operations for a couple of weeks.
Their chat thread has been incredible when they go live.
Then they just released a statement 2 days ago, basically as a mea culpa. Hey, we're looking into this. We have higher standards than this. We know we've let people down, blah, 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 blah. What they really said was, sorry, we got caught, guys. We'll try to be better at hiding this in the future.
Yeah.
The really sick part about it is there's people still actively trying to join their breaks.
Well, and it's just this addictive gambling side of it. You were talking about it a second ago in the other segment, but that's really what's happening. People are so addicted to the chance at hitting. They're so behind from breaking nonstop. Here's the thing. I don't believe there's that many 22-year-old multimillionaires on Whatnot breaking in these $500 mixer breaks all day long.
No.
Like, the debt has to be crippling for a lot of these guys. And on the other side of it, there's no math. Like, a $10 mixer break, you realize how much high-end product has to be in there, and the probability you are better at the casino. Way better odds.
Whoa, way better.
What do you mean? I'm going to get a bunch of cards back. Yeah, those base cards or a couple inserts. Maybe you hit a banger. You get $50 back on your $500. But why did you go back into those breaks 3 more times that night?
Yeah.
It's scary. I think that's why there's an audience, because someone has really figured out and people really crafted a way to really scratch that itch for gamblers. I like gambling. I enjoy it. But my goodness, some of the money that's moving around, I just can't imagine. There's players that can't afford it.
Yep.
And there's nothing wrong with that. If you're responsible with your stuff, or you want to take a chance and you have that money to lose, go nuts.
Yeah.
But if somebody's scamming, if I hit that Waddle 101 and didn't get it, where would I be? I would be on their doorstep. Well, especially the Waddle.
Yeah, especially the Waddle.
I just can't believe they're getting away with it. There should be some charges. I think this should be criminally addressed. I don't know how much of that is developed at this point, but I think it's a lot more common than people realize.
It is, and just like one of the things that, if you're in this hobby, you really need to be cognizant of, especially if, and this is going to get off the rails a little bit, I'll try my best not to get too deep in the weeds, but I think it's an important thing to note. Our economy is entering a weird place, and we're going to have a split recession. People who are on one side of the line are not going to really feel the effects of it at all. People on the other side of the line are going to be crushed by it. Whenever people get desperate financially, scamming becomes a much bigger issue.
Like card trimming.
Yeah. It becomes a much bigger issue. And so be very vigilant and very careful when you're buying stuff, especially if you're doing stuff online, whether it's on Whatnot, whether it's buying stuff on Facebook, whether it's buying stuff on eBay. Be vigilant. If something seems too good to be true, damn near 100% chance it is. If something seems off, just pass and go on to the next thing. Don't get yourself screwed.
Yep. I'd agree. Man, it's been a really upbeat episode. While we're staying positive, one more thing. I don't think we're going to jump into NBA today. I just think I mean, we're cooking along. We're at 45 minutes.
Oh,
already.
really?
Yeah, we're moving. But one more thing I want to talk about as we're being so positive today is Panini Baseball. Panini Baseball products. So with Fanatics getting the license agreement with the MLB, Panini is left holding the bag. What do they have? Some prospects and some vet autos.
Basically, if somebody is a current member of the MLBPA, only Fanatics can use their name, image, and likeness. Mm-hmm. That means that Panini, Leaf, everybody else is going to be left with minor league players and with retired players.
Yep.
That's what you got.
Mm-hmm. And Leaf is already,
theory on this of why it could be a good thing. I want you to share.
What was that?
About cost.
Oh, so this is something that I would track. So the one thing that the more I've been collecting, the more I've been breaking, I've been getting into is the vet autos. Honestly, on a lot of these products, like unlicensed baseball, that's really the only thing that has a chance of holding close to the value that it got whenever it was open would be a vet auto because the player is desirable. You also, with this, aren't going to have necessarily a hot rookie because they're going to be an active part of the MLBPA. So the only way I would get into, give me some examples of this. We're looking at like Donruss Baseball, Prism Baseball, Leaf. I do think, Leaf has spent a good bit of time on the prospect side already. They kind of tried to push a lot of that.
Well, they do the stars and no, that's Panini does stars and stripes. But Leaf does the perfect game stuff.
Perfect
so
game
high
stuff.
School kids,
and a lot of. I have several like low number autos of guys that are big Bowman firsts in the last couple of years.
Yeah.
But the only way I'm jumping into Panini's baseball products would be a multi-case break where you can buy a player for the break, and I'm only chasing a vet that has an auto in there.
Yeah.
That's the only thing that I would care about. So if I found out Ichiro was available, I'd buy Ichiro. If I found out, there was a big, a PC guy for me that's a vet, that's the only way I would get. There's no other way that it makes sense for me to get into that product.
Yeah. And keep in mind with Panini, outside of Flawless, and I think Flawless might be the only one. NT's stickers.
Oh, really?
Yeah, okay, almost all these are going to be sticker autos, not on card.
Yeah. Leaf continues to produce some really cool patches at the prospect level.
Leaf stuff is always awesome looking.
I don't know what kind of relationship they have with some of these vets, but that would be kind of cool to see a little more of. But yeah, I it's getting real. I'm actually excited about it. Panini's baseball line has been tremendously underwhelming, so it's kind of officially happening now. I hate getting into sales where they're like tons of baseball, and I'm like 5 minutes in, it's like, oh no. Yeah, there's not a single logo anywhere in this sale.
They found Prism Retail last year. Yeah, I you know how I am. I don't like Panini in general, so I tend to not grab their stuff. But I will say that if there's a prospect you like or a player that you like, it is you can get autos for real cheap in that product.
What Panini baseball products do you think disappear over the next couple of years because it doesn't make sense to produce them?
I think they'll continue to make Donruss. I think they'll continue to make Prism. They may get rid of MLB Prism and stick with Prism draft picks because that product actually doesn't do too badly. I think they'll still make NT. I think they'll still make Flawless. And I'll be frank, those two products I actually really like the baseball product of because
the relic stuff's really cool.
The cards themselves are really beautiful cards, and they're priced where Flawless and NT should be priced for every sport. Mm-hmm. They're just not.
Yeah.
But I mean, I know I sound like a back in the day old codger, but 5 years ago,
you are an old codger.
5 years ago, you could buy Flawless football for $900 a box, right? Mm-hmm. Like you could buy NT for $556. Now you're paying 10 times that.
Yeah. Well, I'm not.
Well, no, me either, but that's what they go for now. So
yeah. Well, basically, we're trying to tell you the hobby is in a really good state. We're really excited about it. The fact that we actually give a crap about card trimming and the experience people are having with these new platforms like Whatnot and what's happening in the shakeup with Fanatics and the licensing deals, it's all good. But there is disruption going on, baby. And we'll be here with you all the way through it. This has been the Ball Card Show, the sports podcast
For the sports collector.
Bye now.
Peace.